If you don't have a seat, those of you that don't have a seat, we did open auditorium 140 and it will be streamed in 140 as well. So I do see there is 2 empty seats right in the middle right there where they're raising their hands. And I think there's 3 right here, 3 seats down here. Do I have $20? No. Anyone else have an empty seat by them? There's one up there. There's a lot of points up there. But if you would like to sit down while you watch, 140 is open.
Hello, everyone. Holy cow. Wow, thank you all for coming and giving Owen this grand welcome. If you're not familiar with Owen, Owen Dennis is a writer, artist, actor, musician, and director known for his work in animation. Raised in Minnesota, he went on to get his BFA in animation at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. That was in 2009. After this, he moved to China to become an English teacher for several years before returning to America to work as a storyboard artist and writer for a regular show. He debuted Infinity Train, a sci-fi adventure animated series, was released in 2019 to have rave reviews from critics and fans alike, and ran for 4 seasons. His newest show, Among Us, a comedy. Well, thank you. I feel like a comedian up here or something. Like, keep the jokes coming, right? A comedy sci-fi series based on the game of the same name. And they have recently wrapped production on it. So this is part of the Visiting Artist Lecture Series. And we want to give a huge thank you to the Don Bages MCAD Animation Innovations Program. Thank you. Yes. And welcome Bev Bages as well to be a part of this today. So thank you all.
Hi. My name is Owen Dennis. I didn't know how high the screen was going to be, so it's sort of pointing at my feet, but you can trust that the rest of me is also Owen Dennis. As you can see up here, animator, director, musician, everything that was just said. This is the first time I've used Keynote, so it's gonna be fun. Get ready. So I will. The whole thing that I'm gonna be doing is I'll run through a quick idea of, like, who I am, why am I here, that sort of thing, and then I'll do a quick rundown of how I made the pilot for Infinity Train, and then I will go through and tell you just like how exactly do you make a TV show, and what the actual process is. Because if there's anything I can talk about, it's process, not my feelings though. All right. So, look, I'm really excited about these. Look, pretty excited. All right. I was born in Iowa. I was raised for the most part in Minnesota, around Stillwater. It was in Lake Elmo, but if you know where that is. Usually the way I have to describe these things, it just gets like Minnesota, outside Twin Cities, Stillwater, Lake Elmo. So it was Lake Elmo is where I was from. I went to MCAD, got a BFA here. And in college, junior year, I had a bit of a mid-college crisis where, yeah, for sure. Woo! I had a bit of a mid-college crisis where I was working on this stop motion project called Approved, and it was this insanely complex stop motion project, and I was on the floor crying, and I was covered in ants because we had an ant problem, and I called my mom, and I'm like, everything sucks. What do I do? And she was like, oh, let's go do something else. I was like, all right. And she said that she had worked in Yellowstone for a while, and I was like, I'll just go do that. And so for a summer, I went and I worked in Yellowstone National Park as a housekeeper. So I cleaned hotel rooms. that was my job for a summer. And while I was there, I told you. And while I was there, I met a bunch of students who were from China, because that was an easier way to sort of like travel and go across the U.S. So I met a bunch of students from China and became friends with them. And they were like, oh, you explain English words really well. You should go be an English teacher in China. And I was like, that's not a thing. You can't just decide to go be an English teacher in China. And they're like, yeah, you can. And I was like, no. And then it turns out you can. You really can. The basics of what was required was I needed a 4-year degree of some kind, any kind. And I needed to have been from America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, or the UK. And then I had to take a 2-week course on how to be a teacher. And that's how I became an English teacher in China. And they would like pay your way, and they'd like give you a place to stay. And like I also got like Chinese lessons and stuff. I didn't know how to speak Chinese. I knew how to say one phrase, which was "我觉得你很可爱," which just means I think you're cute. I literally did not think to learn how to say hello until I was on the plane. And someone asked me like, oh yeah, so you know how to say hello, you know how to do this thing. And I was like, oh, right. No, I don't know how to say hello, which is, it's some real, this is stupid, but it worked. So I did that after I graduated, and I moved to China, became an English teacher. And then I did that for 3 years. I was just an English teacher in China for 3 years. I'd come back here for maybe a month or so every summer, just hang out, and then go back to China. So I did that for 3 years. And then I moved to Los Angeles, where I became a storyboard artist and writer on regular show. And the way that I got that, job, and this is something I would make sure you're doing this, I just stayed friends with people that I knew. My friend Toby Jones was my freshman year roommate here, in like one of the triplets over there. He was my freshman year roommate. He got a job on a regular show, and when I was getting ready to come back to America, and I was like, I should get started on animation and stuff. I don't know. I was like, is there any jobs open? Do you have one? And he was like, yeah, maybe. and he told me about a job on regular show, and it worked out. And I took like a storyboarding test, and I might get into that in here somewhere, because I have not practiced this speech. So get ready. So we did that. I moved back to Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles. I became I started working in animation. That's the gist of it. Thank you. Let's give it up for Keynote. So in 2008, it's pretty great, right? In 2008, in Shelley Hickle's stop motion class, I made Approved, which was a foam latex puppet stop motion project, and this was the one that I had a breakdown over and was crying on my floor. FYI, foam latex, if you're ever going to use it, in its raw form, smells like ammonia, which is the smell of cat pee. And in its baked form, smells like sulfur, which is the smell of rotten eggs. And I got our building evacuated because I was baking these puppets in there, and they told me, like, don't ever do that again. and they said that they were putting a new rule into the handbook, which I checked before I came here, and it's still there. So there's a rule in the handbook that says no using ovens or stovetops for baking for art-related projects, and that was my fault. Sorry. Sorry for anyone that was trying to use the oven for an art-related project. You can't now. Sorry. Nothing. In 2009, for my senior project, I made The Greatest Ape, which didn't cause any evacuations. That was kind of boring, huh? In 2010, I made an 8-bit StarCraft video. So like after college was over and I was going to China, I was living in China, I was just like still animating stuff. So I made this thing called 8-bit StarCraft, which is my first viral video. Got like 1 million views, and at the time that was like a really cool, crazy amount of views for stuff. I made this other thing called Castle Story MOBE. It was based on this game called Castle Story that they released in alpha, and they showed some video footage of it, and some little guy like fell off a cliff, and I was like, if I had to follow the story, what happened to that guy that fell off a cliff? And I made that, and I also worked on. I made a music album while I was in China because I just wanted to, and I made a music video that went along with it. That was supposed to feel like a '90s sort of VHS looking thing with aliens that look like this. Thank you. Thank you. Gosh. Keynote. Yeah, they're great. So, as I said, when I was in China, I took the regular show storyboarding test. The storyboarding test is essentially a packet full of joke prompts. So it's basically like, just write some jokes. And if they're good jokes, then you can be hired. And if they're not good jokes, then we've never heard of you. And that was the basics of it. And as you can see, my drawings left a little to be desired, but it got me the job. So if you're ever unsure on like, I don't know, my drawings suck, but at least I can tell a joke. Hey, it can happen. Did that. Let's see. 2012 to 2016, I worked on Regular Show. I did 33 episodes of Regular Show. I did sections of the movie for Regular Show, various shorts and stuff. I wrote some songs for it, just a bunch of stuff. And that was basically my life for a long time. And then briefly worked on Close Enough, just helped develop it and stuff really early on. And develop in this case means sort of like we'd hang out in the room, we'd be like, what if this character was kind of like that? What if that one was kind of like this? And that's like what we would do for like months. Did that, and then in 2016, thank you for clapping for the transition, which is what we're clapping for. 2016, I released the Infinity Train pilot, which I will get into in a moment. And then 2019 through 2021, 2019 through 2021, released seasons 1 through 4 of Infinity Train on Cartoon Network and HBO Max, which is what it was called at the time. So, and then just last August, I wrapped production on the Among Us TV show, which you're going to like. I I know there's a certain idea of like, how can you make a show out of that? Turns out, because there's people go like, well, how can you make a show out of Among Us? There's no story. Turns out all stories started from nothing, so you can just kind of make one up. So we did, and you'll like it, and it's good. And then so now I'm developing a bunch of various stuff. Since I wrapped that in August, I worked on another show in between there that I'm not allowed to talk about, and then right now I'm developing multiple different projects. I've got a bunch of horror movies that I'm working on, movie scripts. I've got sci-fi movies, TV shows, kids book, other stuff, as you can see that I'm forgetting because I wrote this last night. And then, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Check this out. There it is. Thank you. Thank you. That's it. That's all you came here for. I appreciate everybody's coming here. It's been great. Thanks, everybody. Okay. All right. So, okay. All right. So the pitch, the pilot pitch. This is usually people want to know, like, how did you get a pilot or anything like that? The basics of a pilot are you just kind of, it helps if you're in a studio already or if you know some executives already, that sort of thing. Always it's going to help if you know someone already. But the way that I met the executives that I pitched anything to anyway was at like a party that somebody had. And I just met them and they put me in a corner and they're like, if you pitch anything, take it to me first. And I was like, all right, I don't know. But the basics that I had were I had two different shows that I pitched to Cartoon Network. One was Galactron, based on that the album that I showed earlier with the music video. And the idea was like, I was like, oh yeah, I know like the characters, I know the worlds, I know everything about this. I have this like down, like I know all the I know everything. And I was like, look, the guitar guy has like a culture where he like learned everything through echolocation, so their whole culture has a written language with holes written in rocks, and the holes just go deeper and deeper into the rock, and that's how you know what word it is, because of how deep it is, because only a creature with echolocation would know how to understand how deep a hole is. And like the one with the masks is like, yeah, it's from a culture where eons ago they zapped their brains, they don't have emotions anymore, and then ironically ever since then they've been trying to understand what emotions even are, and every time they do understand, when they get a new mask to show that they've learned some emotion, which also ironically emotions aren't the single idea of the single mask, like I know all this stuff, right? I'm like, here we go, this is great. That's concept one. Concept two, it's about like a girl on a train and she wants to get off. That's what I got. And the executive was like, all right, well, could you choose one and then come back to me? And I decided I was going to like, well, I liked Galactron a lot. And I was like, I want to make this. And then I said, well, if I'm going to be pitching this to a bunch of executives, they're going to have notes. And I don't want any notes on this. So I will just give them the one that I don't care about. And then when they give me notes, I'll be like, sure, whatever, I don't care. I'll just do it. I learned to care a bit more about it over time. But at the time, I was just like, I don't know, or whatever, something. So we started, I made a pitch packet for Infinity Train. So I started getting characters together, started writing what they are exactly, sort of like who are they, what is their relationship to each other, what is the train, how does all this stuff work. And it's a very basic idea of like, this is Infinity Train. It's a girl, she gets on a train. I don't know why she gets on a train. She's mad about something. I don't know. And that was kind of it. And they liked it and they asked for a storyboard. And that was what I did with the rest of 2014, was I made a storyboard for this pilot. And you can see the character designs are different. If you're familiar with Infinity Train, the character designs are different. The locations are different. Everything's kind of different. The one thing that's kind of the same is Atticus and 1-1, the dog and the little half sphere robot. That's kind of it. And they were like, we like this storyboard. We'll greenlight more of it. And so I just kept like pitching it to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, to the next person. And it'd be like a couple of months I'd work on it. And a couple months later I pitched again to the next person. And you just do this for a while. And eventually I pitched to the head of Cartoon Network. Oops, forgot one. There we go. pitched it to the head of Cartoon Network, and he was into it. And then we made an animatic, which I could play a moment of for you. Maybe. If it plays, which I think it is. There we go, yes.
Do something.
What does that number mean, Miss Tulip?
This is quite
I don't know.
literally
I've
me
only
and my
been
friend
stuck on this
Kat
train for a week. I should be asking
in
you.
a conference room.
In that case, it'll remain an endless
at Cartoon
search
Network.
devoid of
We're just
all
like,
meaning.
I don't know, just record in this room off my laptop.
It won't wash off. It doesn't seem to be powered by anything. Numbers are quantitative. They represent things. But this one just sits there like a dumb number, getting dumber every minute that it sits there because it's dumb. I see you. The switch is a balance, 1-1. You have to be on both sides. Solved!
Yay, yes, yes.
No, Nuss.
Anyway,
The next car will...
you get the idea. After that, there's a fart card. There's a fart joke. Which I'm sorry, I already moved on past. Just imagine there's a really good fart joke. And you're like, yeah. That's better than most fart jokes that I hear. So they liked the animatic, so we made a pilot where we actually hired real voice actors, which, by the way, Kat in the previous one, she was great. And if she's watching this right now, she's going to be so fucking mad that I played this for you, but she's great. But here we have the various voice actors that we had working on it. We have, this is is the pointer even up there? I don't know. Oh yeah, there it is. Great. We had like art done, we had some concept stuff done, and this is the basics of how the art for the pilot got made. I understand that what I'm saying right now is a very draw the rest of the owl kind of thing, but I'm going to get into all this stuff in a little moment. I just want to give you an overview. Backwards. Well, whatever. At the same time that I was making the pilot, they asked for more. They were like, let's say you had 10 episodes, what would that be like? Because they had just done Over the Garden Wall, and that was 10 episodes, and they're like, well, maybe that's just what miniseries are going to be, 10 episode things. And Over the Garden Wall was such a fantastically done experiment that they were like, let's try it again. And so my friends and I rented a cabin for a weekend up in the mountains and just sat and wrote a bunch of stuff, being like, this is what the show should be like. These are what these characters should be like. This is what this episode is, and this episode is, and this episode. And these are the themes that we're going to see arcing through the whole thing, and like all this sort of stuff. I went with Madeline Careypell, who also went to MCAD. She was a comics major here. And Cole Sanchez, who did not. Fuck him. He's great. So we just went for a weekend, wrote the whole show, and a year later, after making the pilot, the show came out. It came out in 2016, on November 2, 2016, which, if you do the math, adds up to about 8 days before the 2016 election. So it was released online, and it was going great. I was like, oh my God, like the numbers are just like 2016 election happens, bang, just like gone. All is just like rockets to the earth because there was just no room on the internet for anything other than this game show host. Luckily, maybe a week or so later, the numbers started picking up again, which showed that it had some pretty good legs. And the people in charge were like, that's pretty cool. That's interesting. And this was the first time that I'd seen like fan art for my own stuff, which is a very weird experience. Working on something for like 4 years and then seeing a bunch of people drawing fan art for it is very strange. You can even see on the far right, that's the conductor that somebody drew because they didn't know what the conductor was. And it's like, it's so fascinating looking at this. But yeah, it was really fucking awesome is what it was. It was a huge hit, got 1 million views. It was the most online views that Cartoon Network ever had. And somehow it all worked out. So the show got greenlit. I don't know why the show got greenlit. It just did. I can tell you some of the things that sort of played into it, I think. This was... Cartoon Network didn't have a show that was about a girl. This was like the first one they'd had in about 10 years that had a girl as the main character, except for Steven Universe, which technically you could say Steven's the main character. And so sort of like, I know, what do you know? And the person in charge of Cartoon Network had this kind of a cool rule that he did, which was about 30% of what they greenlit had to be something kind of like unexpected, you know? So they would greenlight things that are obviously like, look, we're greenlighting Teen Titans Go. Clearly, there's a huge audience for it. People are going to want to watch Teen Titans. Okay, we'll greenlight it. There's things where they know exactly like this is going to hit this audience, this is going to hit that audience, and there you go. And my show was greenlit because they didn't know who would watch it. They were like, why would anybody want to watch this show? We don't know. It doesn't seem like it would be good for children, but it's not. Adults probably wouldn't want to watch it. And so now here I am, 4 seasons later, up here talking to you about why you shouldn't watch my show. But you know, it wasn't an obvious. It wasn't an obvious decision. It was very strange. I think a lot of it did come off the heels of Over the Garden Wall and how it was such a success. And you know, Patrick McHale did a great job with that. But they also knew at this point that there would probably be some kind of streaming service at some point. They didn't know what it was. Like HBO hadn't really combined, all the company mergers hadn't really happened yet, but they knew they probably would happen. And so they were sure like, well, we're going to want to put this out on something online probably. And so it was just very odd sort of stuff. And it was a successful show. It was it had an audience demand of like 22 times higher than other shows when it was released. It was the 4th most watched show on HBO Max. It still has a 9 times higher audience demand, even though it's on nothing. And it was nominated for an Annie Award. You know, so it's like, you know, cool. So what I thought I'd get into is the next step of like, how do you actually get to the parts of how do you actually make a television show. If you follow me online at all, sometimes I've posted this image, which is this, which is a giant flowchart showing step by step every single thing that happens. I can see a bunch of you trying to take photos. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Just don't. Just go online, look up like Infinity Train flowchart. You'll find it. It's on Cartoon Brew. It's on a bunch of stuff. You'll find it. Don't worry about it. And it'll be better than whatever it is you're going to take a photo of a giant screen. Anyway, so what I thought I'd do is go step by step, because I remember when I was in college, I was very interested in what the actual process was. And it's one of those things where I didn't really fully understand it until I got in and was among all the people that do these various things. Because I also remember when I was in college, I didn't really like animating. I still don't really like it. It's not fun to me. It's tedious, and it's drawing almost the same picture over and over again. Like, why would you ever decide to do that? Some people like it. I'm not one of them. But I like animation, and so something that I want to show with this as we go through it is that there are a lot of jobs in animation that aren't necessarily drawing almost the same picture over and over again. And in fact, that's actually a fairly hard job to get in the first place. So, a giant water bottle. And here we go. So, step 1, executives greenlight a new season. We then have to start writing it, and it's a whole long process that takes a few months of writing and figuring out what we're actually going to make into a show. The writers decide on a season arc. They start deciding on a season arc being themes, emotions, what you want, how you want a character to start, how you want a character to end, if there are going to be other characters, and how do we want them to have their own arcs within our larger arc of something else. How do characters interact with each other? How does this character's emotional growth affect this other character's emotional growth? All kinds of stuff that takes months to figure out. And basically, writers will take as much time as you give them. They're like koi fish in a pond. It's just like they are going to be this big, or if you give them a bigger pond, they're going to be this big. And so we get like a few months to work on it, and we sort of get together and figure it out. So our brainstorming session is basically us. Again, I rented a cabin and just went up into a cabin. This one in the top right is actually when we're discussing, yeah, maybe there should be a season that has a big deer in it. That'd be funny. And like, we discuss tones, we discuss blue sky ideas of what a season could be. You become very intimately involved with the people that you're working with, because you're all talking about like, oh, this girl's experiencing this thing. When my parents got divorced, it was like this. And like, oh, well, that's how your parents got divorced? When my parents got divorced, it was like this. And you end up with this, you know, a room full of people being like, well, let's start a therapy session and see how we can apply it to a cartoon character. And we did other things. We would have a thing every time we did a writer session. We would have a thing where we'd like watch our favorite episodes of things, and so someone would find whatever it was that was a huge episode of something that they really loved when they were young, what they currently really love. We would watch them all and see like what you can get from it, because you would watch something. I'd watch an episode of Twilight Zone because I brought in Twilight Zone episodes that I really loved, and we'd watch an episode of Twilight Zone, or Maddie brought in an episode of Strangers with Candy, or an episode of Daria. Or like there's all kinds of weird, disparate things you can pull from. And so we'd watch them all, see if there's anything with them, or also just like hang out and drink and watch stuff. It's like, it's great. And we'd also play D&D. So yeah, look, it's fun. Sitting in a cabin playing D&D, for rules, you guys. Eventually you get the season outline. This isn't so much an outline as it was something we were trying to track the different feelings that we were trying to get across in the show. So we would say like, okay, this episode we want to have thoughts about confronting your feelings, or this episode we want to have thoughts about like how do you adapt to change, because this whole first season especially was very much about the gray, like what is it to, you know, things aren't just always black and white. It's not good and evil. It's like, you know, a little more gray than that. So it was about a girl trying to figure that out. And so we try to go through and be like, okay, empathy, you know, feel your feelings, process stuff. And we'd go through the episode and put a little check mark being like, okay, in this episode, we're going to kind of go over this one, this one. In this episode, we're going to go over this one and this one. And then along the bottom, you can actually see the other thing we were doing, which is tracking what her numbers were. Because the numbers, for anybody who hasn't watched the show, she has numbers on her palm that sort of track what her growth and feelings are as a person. As they get closer to 0, she gets off this train. You can see the numbers will like change, and then we like weren't sure what people sometimes go like, oh, how did you figure out like what the numbers are? Like, how did you, was it like some sort of mathematical thing? Like, how did you do it? And we were like, just kind of felt like maybe it should be 114 now. Then it's 27. I don't know. and that was it. So we tracked the numbers along the bottom, and you know, that was kind of we're doing. Then step 1, I guess, in continuation of step 1, we write a premise. There's 2 different kinds of animated television shows. There's board driven and there's script driven. And Cartoon Network at the time was purely board driven. And so we were trying something new, which was script driven. I say new. It was only new at Cartoon Network, and I'd never done it before. So I'm like, that's a brand new idea. What if you write a script? Isn't that crazy? People are like, whoa, what are you talking about? Script? But the way it would work is you would write this premise that would then just be like only the points of action, only the things that happen in the episode. There's no dialogue in it. There's nothing. It's straight up, this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. And you talk a little bit about themes in there just to make sure it's in there, but that's basically it. And then you'll notice at the bottom of these things, there's always a little thing that says get exec notes. Assume that after every slide, an executive goes like, I have an idea, and then you have to do it. So then we do an outline, which is a 3-page version of the previous thing that you just saw. It is much more in-depth. It still doesn't have dialogue. You're trying to include dialogue unless it's like important to the plot or because you're trying to show somebody that there are jokes. We'd often have a note from our executives being like, it's not very funny. And we'd be like, it's not supposed to be funny. But sometimes it was supposed to be funny. We'd be like, fine. And then we'd like throw a joke in here. And then they'd be like, oh, okay, so there are jokes in it? We'd be like, yeah, we swear. I swear there's going to be a joke in this. I can't write something and not have a joke in it. It's going to be in there. So we do this. And if you were on a board-driven show, this is where the writing process would end. When I worked on a regular show, this is where it would end. I would be handed this, and then they would say, write all the dialogue, write all the jokes, and draw the storyboard. And that's what I would do. That's how regular show worked, Adventure Time worked, Steven Universe, like everything from, like, I want to say 2005 onward, basically. So that's how, like early 2000s. I don't know. Don't quote me on the time, and no one cares about the time. So this is what I would be given, and so then we would move on to the actual script, which includes all the dialogue, and the writers would take each one. And we tried to make sure that writers would be like, hey, this writer was in charge of the premise and the outline and the script, and they will take it all the way through as long as they can. So make sure everybody feels like a sense of ownership over what they're making. Something we figured out when we were writing the show, a script for an 11-minute cartoon, we decided it should be 13 pages. So if you're ever curious about that, 13 pages, no more. If you do more than 13 pages, you have a lot of editing you're going to have to do later. So just do 13 pages. In animation, it tends to be that the usual idea is that like one script page equals 1 minute of footage. In animation, it's closer to 45 seconds because animation requires a lot more description because you're describing entire concepts of worlds, whereas in live action, you're usually like, it's a kitchen. And they go like, okay, great. Whereas in animation, you're like, it's a kitchen in another dimension, and there's planets inside of the refrigerator, and like all this sort of stuff. So that tends to be why they lengthen. So storyboarding. We finish the script, hand out to a storyboard team. We'd have teams of 2 storyboard artists per 11-minute episode. We would sit with the storyboard artists, and we would do a handout. And that's where the storyboard artist, the writer, and usually the art director would sit in a room, and we just discuss what's happening. And the storyboard artist will take it away, and we'll do a bunch of like concept art in there first because we're all reading the same script. And we'll try to figure out like, okay, so who are the characters? Okay, they probably look like this or like this. And we just figure it out in the room over the course of like an hour or two. And then away the storyboard artists take it. And then a week or so later, the storyboard artists finish their first pass on the storyboard. And the storyboard is every shot, every single shot, every single movement that a character makes, all lined up on the board. And we check everything in this stage because the storyboard basically becomes the blueprint for the rest of the show. From here on out, every single thing comes back from this storyboard. So we check that we're not breaking the 180 rule, or we check that we didn't accidentally write something in this episode that conflicts with a later episode because we weren't thinking about it, you know. Stuff like that comes up, and then you spend a few hours critiquing it and talking about how we can better show this emotion or how we can better do this or that. And it's quite literally, as you can see, putting Post-it notes up on a big board. That's it. Then it would be the crew pitch, which is just a week later. They do all the fixes that we talked about. I don't have a better picture. It's the same thing. So we do the crew pitch. They make all the changes from their thumbnails. We show more people than we showed the first time. The first time was just to the writers, and the second time will be to a larger group of people, and we can feel like, oh, they're laughing at this, oh, they're not laughing at that. You can sort of feel out how it's going. Next stage is just cleanup. So the storyboard artists take their 4th and 5th week. It takes 5 weeks overall to do a storyboard. They take their 4th and 5th week to do a cleanup pass on everything. So they make sure all the camera angles and all the shot choices are final, because this is how they're going through all the way to the end. Every character pose that you want has to be in there, because it's going to go through a timing process and an animation process overseas usually. And so there's no one to be like, oh, what if we add another little like hand flip or something? No one's there to do that. So if you want there to be a little hand flip, you better draw it in the storyboard, which is it's a lot of work. All backgrounds have to be completed in every storyboard panel. You have to make sure the perspective is exactly what you want it to be, because while the art direction might fix some of it, some of these shots might go overseas and they're going to do exactly whatever it is that you ask them to do. So if you have a background where the perspective is like wonky and weird, that's what they're going to draw for you. So make sure that you make sure it's like on point throughout the whole thing. You gotta make sure you have every finger. You have to make sure every face is drawn, every eye lines are correct. Like this is just, everything has to be as perfect as you can make it. And then you record the actors. It's quite literally standing in a room, talking to a microphone, much like I'm doing right now, but with a slightly smaller audience. You record with the voice director. Depending on the setup, as you can read here, depending on the setup, some actors might be somewhere else. They might be in like New York. They might be, I know for a while, Jeremy Crutchley, who was playing 1-1, he was living in, I think, South Africa, I think, for a little while. And so we were having to record in like weird, odd hours of the day so that he could record from a studio on the other side of the planet, stuff like that. J.K. Simmons, when he came in to do the record for Pig Baby in our 4th season, for anyone who hasn't seen the show, this sounds insane, but he was like, yeah, I'll record Pig Baby, but only if I can do it from the studio that's 2 blocks from my house. I was like, all right, sure. Whatever gets you to play a giant pig. Yeah. So recorded sessions usually take 1 to 4 hours, and it's kind of what you do. I have a quick little video.
Around the world, got a weird thing to show you, so tell all the boys and girls, tell your brother, your sister, and your mama too. 'Cause we're about to throw down, and you'll know just what to do. Wave your hands in the air like you don't care. Glide by the people as they stop to look and stare. Do your dance, do your dance, do your dance quick, mama. Come on, baby, tell me what's the word.
It's good. It's good.
And that's how you record somebody somewhere else. She's quite literally in a record booth in some other part of the world, I don't know where, and we just had to do it through the phone. Next up is animatic. The animatic is when you take all the storyboards and you put it into an actual like video form. I point this out in the pilot section, but that's basically what it is. You take all your storyboards, you time it all together with the voices, and you make what's close to an animated thing, as close to the actual timing as you can get it. I don't actually have a photo, so this is just a picture of somebody else. The animatic editor puts all the storyboards, recorded in dialogue video form, all sort of stuff. So there's a blueprint for timing, basically, to make sure the animation director knows how fast you want a particular movement to go, and to check and see how long it is. So we had to make sure it was exactly 11 minutes and 22 seconds. We couldn't go over a frame, we couldn't go under a frame. It had to be exactly 11 minutes and 22 seconds because of contracts with studios, because of contracts with overseas buyers, because of contracts with all kinds of contracts. It's contracts. I don't know. I just did what they told me. 11 minutes and 22 seconds per the frame. And something else I wanted to point, something else we do in animatics is a lot of cutting lines, cutting scenes. There are whole scenes that just disappear that you then have to rewrite while you're in there, going like, I don't know, we had to cut this whole set of dialogue things. What if she just shortens it to like this short like 1 sentence thing, and you have to throw that in there. And it's just a lot of like processing and editing. And something I want to point out with this person on the right, this is Revati. She was a production assistant. She as you can see right here, she's quite literally just writing my calendar on a big whiteboard that I would go out and look at and be like, okay, at 10 o'clock, I got to do this thing. All right. And that was her job. And my main thing that I want you to think about is like, don't ever be a dick to anybody. Because Revati now is a development executive at Nickelodeon. And if I want to get something made at Nickelodeon, I have to talk to Revati first. And I have to go, Revati, I have this idea for a TV show. Remember how you were writing my calendar and now I have to ask you for permission to make cartoons? So, don't be a dick. There's always people are always going to be moving around to various positions. For example, after I just finished on Among Us, I'm a showrunner. I took another job as a storyboard artist for the past couple of months. Whatever. You move around all over the place, and it's okay. Just know that. There's some people get very caught on like hierarchical stuff. It's bullshit. Don't get caught on it. So after that, after the animatic is made, it's all given to our animation timer or animation director. I don't know if you guys have seen these things. I don't know if you're still teaching this sort of thing. I remember when I was in school, I was asked to do one of these, and I cheated and said that I did it, and I didn't. Basically, this is a timing chart. So this goes through, and it goes. You can see what's going to happen on every single frame according to the storyboard. All right. So this is laying out every single character that happens in every single shot, and says what they're going to be doing at any given frame to the frame. Some animation directors don't need to use this. Gendy Tartakovsky, I know, just makes his storyboards and then writes underneath them. He just goes 0.2 seconds, this thing happens. 0.213 seconds, this thing happens. I'm not that guy. But he does it. He's great. So I wanted to go through and show you an example of like how this actually works in practice. So this is a storyboard of Corgi running in. There's a frisbee. Corgi runs in. Corgi catches the frisbee, falls down, shakes the frisbee around, and then there's a camera pan that goes over to the left. That's it. What this looks like is this. So what you can see here, if I got my pointer, yeah, there we go. You can see here, DX cast shadow. That's showing that the Corgi quite literally just says, hey, there's a shadow underneath the Corgi that touches the ground. It also says Corgi number 9 runs in. You can tell by this shape, that means they run. For 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, and then 4 more frames, and then they jump. Each one of these 4 frames is a foot contact point. Then they jump up over the course of 4 frames. They bite the disc. They grab it. They land. They drop down. At the same time that this is all happening, right here, the disc is flying in a straight line. That's why it's got a straight line arrow. Flies in a straight line. And right here, you can see the dialogue is honk, which means the dog goes whoop. And that's it. And each one of these, C, D, C, B, B, D, all these sort of things, these are mouth shapes. So it'll be a shape that's sort of like an open mouth, ah, or a mouth with some teeth, ah, or like all the different mouth shapes that you can have. And what that adds up to is this. That. I want to show you. I want to show you something slightly more complex. Get ready. All right. This is a shot where the steward is shooting lasers at Tulip. That's it. Kill that kid! So, what we can see here, Tulip runs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frame cycle. All right, she runs. She takes 6 frames to make one step, takes 6 frames to make another step. This all takes place over the course of, this whole thing is 26 frames long. All right, that's 1.08 seconds of time that we're looking at right here. All right, Tulip runs in, 6 frames, 6 frames, 6 frames. When she gets here, she stops, she turns around, her eyes open because her eyes were closed as she was running. She sits down. At the same time, Atticus, 4 frames, 4 frames, 4 frames. He's a smaller dog. He's got a smaller walk cycle. Takes a bunch of little runs. He sits, turns, holds. At the same time, the bushes are exploding. So you have branches that go up, branches that fall down here, branches and leaves that go up, and all these different things that go back and forth. At the same time, the bush is having, it's all this stuff is random branches and stuff, and these just timed out where they each fall and where they each fly up. At the same time, the steward is blasting lasers, and those are on a 6-frame cycle. So just a 6-frame cycle, and it goes the whole time. At the same time, it's got blue flames on its eyes that are also animating, and that's on a 6-frame, 12-frame cycle. So that's going the whole time. Whoops. At the same time, Tulip is going, ah, over the course of the whole thing. At the same time, Atticus goes, ruh, ruh, ruh. All right? At the same time, in the distance, there's a pipe with some water coming out of it that is also on an 8-frame cycle that goes every 8 frames. It just shows the water going. At the same time, there's a camera adjust that takes place over, 8 frames. All right? And again, 1.08 seconds. And that's this. All of that for that. Is very hard to be an animation timer or director. It's a job that a lot of people aren't cut out for. It's very tedious. But if you're that kind of tedious person, oh, you're going to make money. Because no one wants to do this. It is tedious. Because then we go into the editing bay and we go, it looks like there might be something on that one frame that looks a little weird. Is it in the sheets? And then you sit there going through these sheets, trying to figure out if something was timed wrong or if it was something overseas or like what happened. That's timing. At the same time the timing is happening, another thing is happening. That's the art breakdown. The art breakdown is quite literally taking all the storyboards with the art director, and finding every single thing that needs to be made. Every single thing, all right? So that means that you slowly click through every single storyboard and go like, can this thing be pulled from a previous episode? Do we have this character already? Is there going to be a piece of sweat coming off of somebody? All this sort of stuff. How many times do we see this location? Do we have to change the color of the location because it's a different time of day? Like all this stuff has to be figured out in a very long session. And you will notice that in both of these photos, they are taken from my perspective, where you can see me lying down because it is so tiring. Because I'm just lying on the couch. Let's do a practice breakdown. So, Tulip eating an onion. In this one shot, the art director will have a bunch of questions. Question 1, what is behind Tulip? Because what's back there? I don't know. You can't know unless you draw something there, but nothing was drawn there, and that's my fault because I drew this panel. And so I get to listen to the art director go like, this isn't very good, what's going on here? And I go, I don't know, I'm sorry. I forgot to draw the thing. So you have to figure out what's going on there. What's behind Tulip? Have we seen this side of the room before? Do we have any other footage that takes place on this side of the room? I don't know, because we might have to reference it. Do we ever see that book on the left from a different perspective? Do we want to animate those little drops of spit coming from her mouth? Or was that something that somebody just drew in the storyboard because they were using comics language instead of storyboard language? Do we want each key that she presses on the keyboard to be animated? So which would mean that we'd have to draw the background differently so that there's actually a cell for all the keys. Do you want to, do you want to, instead of animating it, are you okay with the fingers gliding over a backdrop of just a painting? Are you okay with the fingers just doing that and we add sound effects and that sort of feels like they're typing? Are you okay with, instead of doing that, we could change the angle of the keyboard so it's up a little bit and you can't see the keys, but you can see your hands doing this. And then you don't have to worry about it. Do we ever see the chair that she's sitting in? There's all kinds of questions that come up, and it's a lot, and that's just on this one panel. Here's Tulip running towards the train. Questions. How many little monster things are running after her in this shot? Because you look at this panel, and I would say 1.5, 2-ish. It's 3. But there's another one that I drew, and it's my fault. That's why I include these as examples. I don't want anyone else to be like, Owen's putting me on blast in front of this whole school. Can we reuse this background from a different shot? Because it's a whole big desert. Like, can you just take a desert from a different shot and be like, yeah, it's a different desert, and no one's going to notice, and nobody does notice. It's pretty great. Can we use the background? Do we want a different model for Tulip and the Gome because she's so small? That was something I learned from watching Steven Universe. They had different models for like how close they were and how far away they were, which I think comes from like anime and stuff, which, again, not a student of history and history of animation. I was sort of like, oh, cool, good idea. I basically discover things as other people show them to me. So do you want a different model for Tulip? Like, should she be more simplified because she's so small? Is the train moving? How do we make the train move? Because if this is a cell and it's just drawn and people have to draw the train moving every cell, that's hard. That's really hard. If it's a painting, what are you going to do? Because how do you move a painting and make it look like it's going to move well in perspective, right? So what do we do about that? You can make a CG model or a painting or a cell. There's all kinds of questions on that. Do the characters leave footprints on the ground because they're outside and they were in the mud? Lots of things come up. That's just very hard to break down. The art director then takes all this information and figures it all out and goes like, okay, and they talk with me and they talk with everybody, and then they start doing layout, which is background layout. So background layout is quite literally just drawing black and white versions of the backgrounds for every shot. Sometimes you're going to have these long backgrounds that a camera might pan across something. Sometimes the camera is just still. You have lots of different things like that, and you have to make sure all that stuff in the breakdown that we just did previously. Something else that comes up when all these breakdowns are happening is they'll ask for notes from me, and I'll be like, hey, it's supposed to take place kind of in the evening. Because we're in California, they'll be like, all right, yeah, 7 o'clock. I'm like, no, actually, it's in Minnesota, so it's a little bit earlier. And so could you make it closer to like 4:30 something in there somewhere? And they're like, all right. I remember another thing that happened in this kitchen was there was an avocado here, and I was like, it's not in California. We're not doing this in California. It's gotta be something else. Maybe an apple or potato. I don't know. And they were like, all right, so it got changed to an apple. Yeah. And then you also have character design. This happens at the same time. Character design is, this is what I was talking about earlier with the close and the medium and the far distant model, where she just gets more and more simplified as it goes far smaller. Character design includes things like, just the straight up classic, these are character designs, but also includes special poses and things like group shots. Sometimes you've got so many characters that just get used in one shot. So why would you do like a whole turnaround for this fish person when they're just going to be seen from this one angle ever, right? So you do a whole big group shot like this is something character designers do. They'll also do special poses like these or the mouth shapes that I talked about earlier, where this is a character who I think I voiced this one. Not I think, I know I voiced this one. And he just goes, got the time? And that's kind of it. And we're like, but that still meant that we had to draw like what does the mouth make on this skeleton. It also includes special poses. Let's say you want to kill a dog. And you're like, well, I want to make sure that when the dog is killed, and when we kill this dog, that it is as impactful as possible. So we want to make really sure that we draw this dog really well, so that when it dies, it'll really hurt. Not that that happens in the show. I don't know. Watch the show if you haven't seen it. Nothing bad happens to the dog. Thank you. So that's character design. On our show, I want to throw one more thing out there. On our show, we didn't have many characters overall. A lot of shows, they do have a lot of characters. Think of Simpsons or Family Guy or all those things. They have a lot of characters because they just burn through them so quickly. Our show is basically following like 3 characters as they go through a bunch of cars. And there are other characters in there sometimes, but not a lot. So you wouldn't hire a whole character designer just for that. Regular show had a whole character designer because regular show has a lot of characters. But for our show, I was like, no, I think we should hire someone who does, people who can do characters, but also they can do all the other designs that we need in the show. So that includes things like prop design. Prop design is quite literally like, hey, we need a phone. It needs to look kind of like this. And the question is like, hey, do you want it to look like an iPhone or do you want it to look like Android? And I'm like, she'd have an Android. And things like, things need to be designed because basically what's happening is you're trying to limit how much other people have to make decisions down the line. Basically, everything that you're ever doing is trying to make other people's jobs down the line easier. That's the whole thing. So you have a phone, you've got papers and how they would sort of animate off. You've got water wiggle, a handkerchief that you might dab on a sobbing child after her dog dies. For example, again, watch the show if you haven't. The dog's fine. This would also include FX design. So if people want smoke, if we need smoke in something, the little spittle that I talked about earlier when she's eating the onion, that would be an FX. You just draw like 2 little water droplets and just making sure that do the water droplets in your universe are they just circular water droplets, or do they have the little pointed tail on them, or like how are they made? That's you have to come up with all these decisions. Things such as like footprints in the snow. This at one point the creature like skids to a stop, and we had to make sure that like I want streaks from the claws to be up on the sides of a thing. And then sometimes they have to interact very specifically with the backgrounds in some way. So for example, in this grid car, all these little cubes sort of pop out of the ground. And so we made sure that every time we did a design, we had all the designs for the backgrounds first, and then made sure we drew the cubes on top of that so everything matched up perfectly. Step 7, color. This includes paint, which is the thing most people think about when they think about like, what do you do in a cartoon when you're coloring stuff? Well, you paint some backgrounds, right? This is the thing most people think of. That includes burst cards. That's what these are. It includes burst cards. That includes just your basic establishing shots. That also includes things like this, where earlier when I was talking about how what if there's a different time of day, something like that. That's something that they were checking when we made this. So we have these bleachers, and we had to make sure that we have the bleachers in multiple times of day and multiple colors, because it's in different moods and tones, and we're trying to make it feel different depending each time that you look back at the bleachers. See? It was really important to me. And I remember my art director, when I first did this, she was like, is he going to be like this for the whole damn show? Because this is the first episode. I'm like, I'm not going to be like this for the whole show. It takes place in Minnesota, and if I don't get this right, my parents are going to be like, oh, yeah, check that out. 7 o'clock, huh? Great, yeah, that's what time it was, sure, yeah. And like all my parents, all their friends are just going to needle me. So I have to get the time right on the clock. So color design also includes character color. Character color will include prop, character, everything. And you're trying to make sure that the characters look correct on the backgrounds that you have. So you have all these backgrounds. If you do just a standard character color, like what's generally referred to as the daytime palette, if you just have the daytime palette on everything, it looks flat and it looks not very good. So you have to change the color of the character depending on where they are, what time of day, etc. That includes things like this, where one is next to something glowing. Do we want to make this side of him darker, or just make this side of him brighter, or how do we want to do that? All kinds of questions like that come up. And includes things like that. This whole thing is just for like, how do we make sure the sweat drops the right colors that we want on these things? That's how finicky this gets. And then it goes into animation. After we do all the color, after we do all that stuff, it gets shipped. And it used to be that they quite literally shipped it in giant crates to Korea. And now it's an email, which is nice. We can get into a debate about outsourcing and all that sort of stuff, but I'm just going to tell you how this works right now. We can talk about the rest of it after I'm no longer on video. So it goes to Korea. Our animation studio was in Korea. What you see here is huge amounts of paper because it was still being done on paper and pencil. This was being done with a mechanical pencil on paper. Each one of those colors that you see there is a different episode of a different television show. So I know there's some Amphibia ones in there. There's some OKKO and some Steven Universe, I think, in there. That's a whole show right there. That's an entire television show. And on the right, you see we made a CG model for the train. Sometimes we used it. Sometimes we used paintings. We switched depending on what the shot needed. And I traveled over to Korea to talk with everybody and figure out, like, how do we want to do this? And I would talk with the directors, and we figure things out. And the animators have their own, like, cubicles and stuff, and they're just in there, like, drawing like anybody else would be drawing. It's mostly discussing how to, like, handle certain characters, how do we handle certain scenes, how do we do all this stuff. I really liked working with this company, Sunmin. The owner of this studio is also an animator himself. And he started his own animation studio in Korea, and he's like, he worked with all kinds of people. Like, he worked with like Moebius and like all kinds of crazy shit. He worked on like Batman the Animated Series. It's crazy, long history. So next step, edit. All that stuff, they put it together in Korea, gets sent back to us. We then sit there in the editing bay and we get a work print, and it's quite literally just shot next to shot next to shot next to shot. And we go like, do we want to speed up this shot? Do we want to cut a couple frames here? Do we want to redo this? You just go through the whole thing, moment by moment, and figure out what you want to do. I only include this one because my editor wrote, instead of writing duck, he wrote dick. And I just think that's funny. I'm sure, again, he's going to watch this and he's going to be so happy I point this out. And then we do retakes. Retakes are, sometimes it's easier to ask the animators overseas, like, hey, could you do try this pass on this animation again. Sometimes it's quite literally easier for me to like bring it into Photoshop and just like erase the eyeball and put it in another spot. For example, here and here. Their eyes were just pointed the wrong direction in the shot, and I was like, oh, I don't want their eyes pointed up, I want them pointed down. I took these photos mid-process, so it's not like they handed us a crazy-looking thing. This is my fault. I'm only showing you things that are my fault, except for the cross-eyed dick car. It's a good question. So then for all the Steward stuff, like I animated all the Steward actions. I highly recommend, if you ever make a television show or an animated anything, never do something that has 14 tentacles. Don't do it. Don't do it. There's like a part of your brain, I know right now, there's a part of your brain where you're like, yeah, but it'd be pretty sweet, right? A thing with 14 tentacles. Don't do it. You'll be so mad at yourself. So I animated all the Steward and all their tentacle stuff. And sometimes that was nuts. And then it moves on to sound, which is I would sit with my composer, Chrome Canyon, and I would sit with the sound editor, and I would tell them like what it is that I want music-wise, what it is that I want sound-wise. For this is the one time that I was able to actually sit with him in his studio while he was working on it. hands. Yeah. He's awesome. He's a very multi-talented person. You go like, I need a rhomba. Can you make that? And he'll be like, yeah. Just do it. He had this huge, crazy, cool like analog setup, like all these original synthesizers from like the 80s and 90s and stuff, and he would just make this stuff. It was awesome. This was we'd work on sound effects sometimes. They had a Foley room where they would quite literally just sit there with pots and pans and go like clink, 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 clink for whatever was happening on the screen. And then we would do the final sound effect pass, where we sit there for a few hours and go like, hey, bring the music down here. Could you bring the bass up here? Could you bring the treble down here? Hey, could you isolate the whatever this hertz level, the 1200 hertz level, and bring that down so that it makes room for this sound instead? And you get like super technical on that. It also includes things like, you know, when I went in and we did the GOM, they start flying around, and they're like, okay, so I added like bug sounds. And I was like, I don't want like bug sounds. I want it to feel bigger. And so I was like, what do we do? Oh, okay, well, let's make all the GOM, whenever they fly, it's like a Harley. So you make sure it's like a Harley. It's like brum, 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 brum. Every time they fly, it sounds huge and big. And so it's not actually a bug. It's just a Harley for this bug dinosaur thing. I don't know. Yeah, and that's what we do. And you listen to it on these amazing speakers. And this is, I think, people who've worked in sound or have discussed sound in general are like, man, it sounds good in the theater. And then I bring it home, it sounds like crap. And it's because people don't always test for everything. So something we would do is we would listen on these amazing speakers, and they would switch it all through like a set of laptop speakers and be like, what's the worst speakers we can find, and play it through that. And does it still sound good or sound good enough? We'd be like, okay, great, let's go with that. And the final stuff would be the editor and the production assistants get together, and they render everything so it's ready to air in other countries or other formats or whatever. And that takes a while, and then it airs on TV or on the internet or wherever. And it's basically, I finish it up, and then it goes away. And then someday I see it on a screen somewhere. And that's kind of the end of that. Like after that, my main point here that I wanted to make with this is that if you are somebody who's sort of like, oh, I like animation, I like working in animation, I think animation's cool, I don't want to work in 3D clicking little NURBs or whatever. I don't want to draw a slightly different picture every frame. I don't want to do that. There's a whole bunch of other things you can do. And it's like put together by a huge team of people, like a lot of people work on it. Like throughout our whole Infinity Train production, I think at our highest, including our overseas studios, we're usually working with about 70 people. Like that's just on one show, you know? So there's a lot of ways you can get jobs in this industry and do this sort of thing that isn't necessarily animation itself. Let's see. Oh, yeah. 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 I wouldn't count it down. You don't know how long this is going to take. Yeah. Whoa. Thank you. I don't know what time it is. I don't know how this works.
Okay.
We're a little over, sorry.
Are you fine with a few questions? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we are going to do a few questions. We do have like a time limit because obviously we all have to get back to classes and life and things like that. Don't be sorry. That was amazing. Okay.
I can be sorry for it.
I'll let you be sorry, but you don't have to be. So just so you know, it'll be a few questions, but yeah.
So, I gotta be honest, I have not seen your show. But I heard about the production story and how it, got canceled and basically got sent to the forbidden zone.
Yeah.
I have this question in mind. What do you think about, like, preserving media, especially animation, because especially in the age of streaming, where shows come and go and just get deleted and stuff.
Watch it legally until you can't. I mean, what do they expect to have happen? What do they expect to happen? If you make this thing available for people to watch, they want to watch it. Okay, that's great. If you then say no, you can't watch it anymore, what do you think is going to happen to that piece of media? Like, duh. Yeah, watch it legally until you can't.
So you've been here throughout my whole college career. Like, I've seen all of your talks. From, I think, the first one was I was a freshman, and you wanted, it was during COVID. You wanted like a tour of the animation studio because it was like not different from when you.
I came just before I did this. I saw it again, and I was like, "This is crazy in here, man."
And even before I came to college, like, I watched Infinity Train with my brother, so like you've just been like a part of like my animation like process for a while, and I just wanted to say thanks, and my brother wanted to also say thanks because we really like the show.
No problem.
I also actually have a question too.
Yeah.
I've been here every time, and I just I don't think I'm very memorable. However, as time has gone on, I've become kind of worried about this, like maybe mattering, since like they always are like, oh, you need to know someone to whatever. So like I guess the question is, how do you develop a personality that is unique and approachable?
This is quite literally a question I've never had in my life. So this is very cool. You can't go through your life hoping to develop a personality. You do have a personality. Everyone has one. It just exists. You can feel like maybe people aren't paying attention to you or whatever, but I can guarantee every single person is paid attention to by somebody. Like, no matter what. That's just how it is. That's life. This idea of I must be a memorable person is not being true to you. Like, what's true to you is making stuff that speaks to you, looking and being a part of things that matter to you, being a part of community, all those sorts of things. That's what you gotta do. That's how I feel, at least. Because I've never looked at myself and gone like, there's a distinctive guy. My wife. My wife, when we come here to Minnesota and we go to Fleet Farm, my wife is like, where are you? You look like every single other man in here. And she cannot find me. It's you just gotta do you and don't worry about what's happening with other people. It's not gonna work. thinking about what's going to happen with other people. It's okay. You'll be fine.
I'm not exactly going specifically into animation myself. I'm going to comics, but I feel like something that I would like to learn more about is you say that you met with a lot of executives at like parties and stuff, and I was wondering like if there were any like methods that like I'm not exactly a party person per se, but I was wondering if there are like I guess like official kind of in-system methods to like actually get a hold of these people, or do you like have to know a guy who knows a guy?
There are always in-system methods to do it. Like they'll often have some email available somewhere that you can do. The thing is, there's a lot of people that just contact them and they don't know who they are. If you think about the process, the actual process of getting a show made is you walking into somebody's office and going, "Hi, you've never met me before, but I want you to give me $7 million." And then you have to get that person to believe you and give you $7 million. That is an insane situation to be in. So they tend to not like it when somebody just approaches them from nothing. It is something where it just helps to have been around for a while. There aren't many people that walk right. Honestly, I don't know anybody who's ever done it, who walks right out of school and goes like, and now I get my own TV show. Actually, no. I can think of one person that happened to, and they crashed and burned hard. I'm not gonna say who they are. This isn't. I'm not here to. We're not doing that. But it has happened, and I really do recommend. You want to build up experience first in everything. And even if you're thinking about, you said you're in comics? Yeah. Madeline Careypell, who has worked on me on Among Us, she worked on regular show, and she did some stuff on Steam Universe too, and she was my supervising producer on Infinity Train, and she was my co-executive producer on Among Us. She came from comics. Like she didn't go into animation. It was all comics, but she built up through storyboarding, and she's like my go-to person on everything. When I'm trying to be like, how do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? She's just always the person that I go to for that. So it doesn't really matter like where you're coming from. It's really more about experiences and making sure that you've had enough, you just get enough under your belt, and it'll just sort of start to seep into your life, which is not a very proactive feeling. It doesn't feel good to be like, yeah, so they just sort of come along. Like that answer kind of sucks, but that's kind of what happens. And when I say I met executives at parties, I met an executive at one party, okay? That's what I'm talking about. I met one executive at one party, at somebody's birthday party, who I barely knew him, and I was just at his house. I'm like, this is weird. It was just some place I walked into, with the, often undeserved confidence of a white guy who doesn't know what he's doing. We got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. I personally am really, really excited to see the Among Us show. I was just wondering, like, what brought you to the project?
I have 2 agents and I have a manager, and their job is that I pay them 20% of my salary, and they go talk to these companies for me, and I don't have to. They got me in contact. I knew that they'd learned that Inner Sloth, the game company, was trying to make a TV show version of it. I spoke with Inner Sloth. They seemed cool. I know Inner Sloth talked with a couple other creators and stuff, and they liked my take on it. The idea that I had on how to make the show, how you would make it into an ongoing series, like all that sort of stuff. They just liked it and went for it. Yeah, it was really just a couple of meetings and we went for it. It was nice. At the same time, I was under contract at CBS. And so CBS and Among Us, and we all just sort of glommed together through a series of almost random events. I'm really sorry that the answer so often is just like, it's kind of random, but also it's like, you know, the way you get things to happen is it's like preparation meets timing or whatever. I don't know what the phrase is, you know, but it's like, if you're prepared for when these things come along, it feels like, wow, this thing randomly happened to me. How did that even happen? But like, yeah, but you've also spent years working on your craft or whatever. So when somebody comes along and they go, here's an opportunity, you get to be like, yes, I can do that. As opposed to 3 years ago, if somebody had asked me that, I wouldn't have been able to do that, you know? So that's kind of just like, you just build up experience and you start knowing people and just sort of works together. Also, I pay 2 agents and a manager.
All right, sorry, we're gonna be done with the questions. We have to end it, but what? One more? Okay.
We'll do one
You
more.
want to pick the person?
Let's pick someone in the back. Way in the back, all the way against the wall.
For you. You pick? Who'd you pick in the back?
Headphones.
Headphones.
Everybody was pointing at her.
Way in the back.
Yeah.
All the way in the back.
I thought I'd make the last one as difficult as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering, with like characters and copyright and stuff, after you give the studio just like everything, and like once the show's over, do you get to keep the characters afterward, or do they still belong to the studio?
Nope, it's theirs.
Oh.
Here's the thing. There's a trick to it. There's a trick. If you are making something with the studio, like I pitched Infinity Train just to the studio and made it just through the studio, it's theirs. If, however, I did something like, say, I had a comic that I was making on my own or a book that I made on my own, and then I went to the studio and said, hey, do you want to make a TV show adaptation of this? They would own whatever you make with them as a TV show, but they would not own your comic. Yes, now you're seeing the loophole. Yes. That's really part of the trick, I think, going forward, is doing independent stuff. Doing independent stuff that they have to license from you. That's it. Anyway.
All right. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you very much. It's been very cool.
No way. What?